Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gilda Evans, bringing you the Autism Resource Podcast. This podcast and the ARP website are your one-stop knowledge and resource base for autism and much more. I'm happy to have Jessica Leving Siegel join me as my guest today. Jessica is the founder of the Center for Siblings of People with Disabilities and the author of Billy's Sister, Life When Your Sibling Has a Disability, a picture book based on her experiences growing up with her brother Billy, who has autism. She has also spent over a decade working in nonprofit marketing and communications and is the owner of Sing Creative Group. Welcome, Jessica, and thanks so much for taking the time to join me and discuss the work that you do.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So, to begin with, how did you first get involved with supporting siblings?
Yeah. Well, so my brother, Billy, who's the actual person featured in the book, he has autism. And so I'm about 6 years older. And it actually kind of started naturally when we were kids. And he was receiving services at a local therapy practice. And I was in middle school, and the therapist asked my mom if she knew of any resources for siblings that I was part of because they were getting a lot of parents coming in and saying, the brothers and sisters at home really need support too. And she didn't, but I loved writing and was a very community service oriented, overachieving middle schooler, very type A. And she kind of suggested me as I bet Jessica would be willing to put something together or come speak or whatever would be helpful. And they loved the idea, so they actually funded the first self-published version of Billy's Sister. And we had an original version that a friend of mine illustrated, and we just kind of had it bound at Kinko's. And for many years, it was just a local thing. And then, really, once I was older in my 20s, I just started realizing, wow, there's still really not a lot for siblings. And I wonder if we can throw this book up on Amazon and, if it can help people. And it all just kind of was a groundswell from there.
So, then that sounds like part of the motivation of what prompted you, but what, in addition to that, prompted you to create the Center for Siblings? And can you tell me a little bit about what the center does?
Sure. Yeah. So, like I said, my background is marketing and communication. So it really started with I'm going to get this book republished and relaunched, put it, make it more widely available, and then use my marketing skills to spread the word because I really am not seeing anything else like this available. And I was really disappointed when I looked and saw there really weren't any other children's books that really validated that a sibling might feel some more challenging emotions, that sometimes there's anger or jealousy or guilt. The only books I could find were more, oh, my sibling may have all these challenges, but here's why it's actually so awesome and blessing in disguise. And I'm so lucky to have this sibling, which is all wonderful. There's a place for those books too. But there was a gap in validating the emotions of siblings that were having a tough time. And so once I did get the book out there, I immediately started hearing from parents and actually from a ton of adult siblings saying, wow, we really need more like this. We really need more resources. Where can you point us next? And I didn't have any other resources beyond the book. So kind of ended up creating my own. And yeah, now our center, we primarily are just sort of a publisher. We've published a few additional books to try and tell some additional stories. We have our book, Emily's Sister, which is written by a child named Luna who wrote it herself about her real life sister, Evely, who is in a wheelchair and has some medically complex needs. So told, the story of what's it like when your sibling goes to the hospital and eats out of a feeding tube and lets kids really see that. And then we do some public awareness campaigns, and we have a couple of worksheets on our website. And yeah, we really try to just be a clearinghouse of where are all the resources that parents can find. And sometimes we'll hold parent workshops or workshops for teachers and educators, and just try to fill in the gaps and meet the needs where we can.
Okay, so then It sounds like there are a lot of good resources there that people can connect to and connect with, and kind of point them in the right direction for maybe answering some questions that are going on in their minds, right? Or at least get some validation and feeling that they're not alone in what they're feeling and the experiences that they're having. So what advice would you give to parents who are looking to support neurotypical siblings of kids with neurodivergences or disabilities?
The biggest thing that has really come out of all of our work is just how important it is to make space for some of those maybe less desirable emotions. And one of the things that we were doing for a while was also a podcast, which has fallen a bit by the wayside just due to our, resources and time availability. As you know, it's a lot of work to do a podcast, but
Absolutely.
yes, but for a while, I was interviewing a lot of different specialists and academics and therapists and people who really had done the work with both children and adults with disabilities. And there are some studies that show that um, kids who have a sibling with a disability are significantly more likely to develop anxiety and depression and what's kind of those withholding and minimizing disorders. So as opposed to maybe acting out or having, behavioral outbursts, they tend to hold it all in. And even if, this is not at all a blame on parents, but the natural inclination of a lot of parents is to try to sugarcoat things, try to protect the siblings, try to, say, no, 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 you don't really mean that you hate them. You just, you love your sibling. You just, sometimes it's hard, but you love them. And of course, you want your kids to all love each other, but kids don't develop healthy coping mechanisms if they don't have the space to say, yeah, when my brother or sister hits me, I don't like it. That's a natural response. And there was a story of one family that came to a workshop we were holding as an online webinar just for parents. And one of the parents said, what can I do? I don't remember the exact ages, but something like, my 2-year-old is started saying that she hates her older brother because he has a lot of complex intellectual disabilities and he hits her and she says, I hate you. And this is some of her first language development and it's making me so sad. How do I get her to stop hating her brother? And we had a therapist on the call with us who said, you don't, it's when a 2-year-old is being hit, when all day you're telling them, don't hit, be nice, like respect people's boundaries. This is personal space. What kind of message are you sending to say, well, except for when it's your brother, when he hits you, that's okay. And you have to like it. What are you setting them up for when you give that message? And it's a normal response to say, hitting hurts. I didn't like that. I'm mad at the person that hit me, and just welcoming that and accepting that and letting them feel that and say that. And then as they get older, as it's developmentally appropriate, you add in the education, the context. Here's why it's happening. Here's what you can do, but never just to really try to avoid saying you shouldn't feel that way or, just not making space for those very real feelings they might have.
Yeah. And I think that's some really good advice and very, very valid. You were talking about some of the people that you interviewed when you were doing the podcast and some other organizations and authors and so forth that you're familiar with. So can you talk a little bit about what other resources are out there for siblings and parents?
Yeah, so the biggest two that we've started referring people to, because we definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we get a lot of inquiries of people once they're sort of bought in and realize, yes, my kid needs more support. They are looking for in-person groups for their kids, and we don't offer that. So we always send folks to sib shops, which is a great organization that's been around for a long time. And they have a website where you can plug in your zip code and find a sib shop group near you, where depending on your kid's age and your location, it's a peer group. And haven't looked at their website in a while actually, but I believe they really focus on it's not a support group, it's just a peer friendship group where they come. It's a space just for the siblings to have a fun, safe space where they're doing fun activities. And it's a safe place to be able to say, oh, your sibling did something that made you feel embarrassed last week. I can relate to that. And, the parents aren't there. They can say whatever they want in a non-judgmental space where their kids are there that get it. So I definitely recommend checking them out if you've got kids. And then for adults, there are a couple of different sibling organizations. Um, and you know what? I'm going to go on our website. So maybe you want to cut this part out because I'm forgetting their name. Let me pull it up for you. Um, Okay, I'll start over. So the for adults, we recommend the Sibling Leadership Network. They have a really vast network of those adult support groups. So similarly to how Sib Shops kind of supports the kids, the Sibling Leadership Network really exists to do that for adults. And you can look on their website as well and find where you can plug in. And they also do they also do a bit of advocacy and helping adult siblings to connect to, how can we build more supports for siblings and for our brothers and sisters who do have disabilities? How can we advocate for more resources, more government support, both to take care of our siblings and, those siblings that do have a disability and help them to have, more thriving, successful, flourishing life. And then that also helps these adult siblings who are often really struggling with being a caretaker and figuring out how to take on that role as parents age. So that's a great support group for that group as well.
Is there a particular story, either personal or one that you heard about or experienced through your organization or people that you've been in contact with, um, that is a good example of what we've been talking about that you'd like to share?
That's a good question. Um, I don't know if I can think of one particular family other than, that one story of the younger sister who was getting her brother was hitting her. But one cool thing that I've seen is over the years since I started this nonprofit, and I don't know if, I'd love to say that we paved the way and opened the floodgates, but it may also just be that, it was COVID time and a lot of people had some time at home and were dedicating themselves to finding online community. But there really has been kind of a mini explosion of additional resources and groups and blogs and podcasts since we started ours. And when we started our podcast and published our book on Amazon, I had not been able to find anything like it. I mean, those two organizations, Sib Shops and the Sibling Leadership Network, they have been around for a long time and they really, set the foundation, but they really didn't have resources like that. And now there's a bunch. So now, if you search Amazon for sibling books, there are a bunch more. There are more podcasts. I've started to follow a lot of really wonderful sibling podcasts who are kind of telling those stories, bringing people in. And it's just the adults. I think there's so many adults who have a lot they really need to process and a lot that they haven't been given space to process before. So it's been really cool to see the way that that's being talked about more and really brought into the open.
Hey, that's really nice to hear. So then what do you think is the most important takeaway or two for the listeners to have from our conversation?
I think the biggest takeaways are, number one, just acknowledging siblings have needs too. I think that has in the past been a bit of a hurdle, and it's becoming less so as these resources are becoming more broadly available and it's getting talked about more. Um, Even, I was just realizing in Wicked, the movie, it's been so popular and everywhere. And I have, I saw the play 10 years ago and didn't realize that's also kind of a sibling story. She's, Elphaba is a sibling. Her sister, I think it's Nessa, is in a wheelchair, and the whole thing kind of starts because she has to go with her sister to go take care of her at school. And there's all of these, challenges that come with that. And so it is becoming more talked about and more visible, which I think is great, but it still sometimes I think bears reminding, especially because there are so many siblings. And this was totally me. And I hear a lot of parents say, Oh, I don't think, my kid's not struggling at all. They're not embarrassed of their sibling. They're not angry. They're like my little mini mom. They're so helpful. All they talk about all day is how much they love their brother and sister, and they volunteer in the special ed classroom, and they want to be a special ed teacher when they grow up. And that's so common, and it can be great. If that's someone's genuine feelings, that's wonderful. And just that doesn't mean that they're not struggling and keeping it from you, or maybe not even letting themselves feel it. And I think kids can be really sensitive and aware to not wanting to overburden their parents, who they can tell are already really burdened. And just remembering that even the kid that seems the most well adjusted, it doesn't hurt to just start a conversation, make a little space to say, if you're occasionally feeling like this is a lot and it's hard, that's okay. That's normal. And seeing that is great. And then I think the second is just, that there is community out there. There are resources. It's something to take advantage of, and it takes a little bit of looking. But once you find it, it can make a huge difference. And just finding that network of peers and that support can really be transformational.
Yeah, I think very good suggestions and very wise words. It's so important to be authentic and to keep the doors of communication open and to reach out if you need to. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica, for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other popular platforms. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you would like more information on this topic or anything else we've covered on the Autism Resource Podcast, visit us online at www.autismresourceproject.org/podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, contact us through the website or comment on any of our social media channels. And be sure to check out our growing website often, since we are continually adding useful information and resources. I want to thank our listeners for spending part of their day with us. This is the Autism Resource Podcast, and I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.